In a faraway kingdom, the Emperor of China lived in a palace so delicate that visitors held their breath when they entered. Its walls shone like porcelain, its corridors rang softly beneath silk slippers, and every flower in the garden had a little silver bell tied to it, so no one could pass without music following them. Travelers came from many countries to admire the palace, the gardens, and the glittering court. Yet when they returned home and wrote about China, they praised one wonder above all the rest, a small gray nightingale who sang in the forest by the sea. One evening, the emperor opened a book sent from a distant land and found his own kingdom described with great admiration. He smiled at the gardens, nodded at the palace, and then stopped at a sentence that troubled him. It said the nightingale was the finest treasure in all China. The emperor frowned. How could the greatest treasure in his empire be unknown to him? He summoned his courtiers at once. They bowed, trembled, and searched their memories, but no one had heard the bird. The emperor ordered that the nightingale be found before nightfall, or the whole court would lose his favor. The grand officials hurried through halls and gardens, asking scholars, guards, gardeners, and musicians. At last, they found a poor kitchen girl carrying scraps to her sick mother near the sea. She listened to their questions and answered simply that she knew the nightingale well. Every evening when she walked through the forest, the bird sang so sweetly that tears came to her eyes. The courtiers were astonished that such knowledge lived in the kitchen and not among ministers. Still they followed her out of the shining palace, past the silver-belled flowers, and into the shadowed wood. They had not gone far before a cow lowed in a meadow, and one courtier clasped his hands. Surely that was the famous nightingale, he said, a voice of great strength. The kitchen girl shook her head and led them onward. Then frogs croaked in a marsh, and another official praised their charming temple bell tone. Again the girl smiled politely and said they were wrong. The court had spent so long indoors that it had forgotten the living sounds of the world. At last the trees opened toward the sea, and from a branch above them came a song as clear as moonlight on water. There sat the nightingale, small, gray and plain, with no jewel on its breast and no golden cage around it. The courtiers stared in disappointment. Could this modest creature be the wonder praised across the world? But when the bird sang again, all their doubts fell silent. The kitchen girl listened with tears in her eyes. The officials lowered their fans. Even the sea seemed to pause beyond the trees. They invited the nightingale to the palace, promising honor and admiration. The bird answered that its song sounded best among green branches, but it would gladly sing for the emperor. That night, the great hall glittered with candles, silk, gold, and porcelain flowers polished to a perfect shine. The nightingale was given a perch near the emperor's throne, and the entire court gathered to judge the strange little guest. At first, there was only silence. Then the nightingale sang. It sang of moonlit woods, fishing boats on dark water, poor mothers waiting by open windows, and all the quiet things no court musician had ever noticed. The emperor listened until tears rose in his eyes. When one tear fell down his cheek, the nightingale knew it had received the highest reward a singer could desire. The emperor was so moved that he offered the nightingale his golden slipper to wear around its neck. The bird declined with gentle dignity. It had already seen tears in the emperor's eyes, and no jewel could be greater than that. Still, the court insisted on honoring it. The nightingale was given a cage, 12 servants, and permission to walk outdoors twice a day, and once at night, each time tied with silk ribbons held by officials. Everyone praised the bird loudly, Yet the nightingale began to miss the forest, where no one measured music by rank, ceremony, or applause. One day, a magnificent gift arrived from Japan, an artificial nightingale made of gold, silver, diamonds, and rubies. When wound, it sang one of the real nightingale's melodies with perfect precision. Its tail glittered, its body flashed with jewels, and it never grew tired at the wrong moment. The court was enchanted. The music master praised the machine because its song could be understood completely. There were no surprises, no wild pauses, no living breath. The emperor ordered the two birds to sing together, but the real nightingale's free song and the machine's fixed tune could not truly meet. The mechanical bird was asked to perform again and again. It sang the same beautiful phrase 33 times without complaint, and the court applauded as if repetition proved perfection. During the excitement, the real nightingale slipped through an open window and flew back to the forest. When the emperor learned it was gone, he felt insulted. The courtiers called the living bird ungrateful and praised the artificial one as more reliable. It was placed on a silk cushion beside the imperial bed, and for a time everyone agreed that a jeweled song, safely controlled, was better than a living voice that might choose its own sky. For a whole year, the artificial nightingale sang at banquets, ceremonies, and private evenings. The people learned its tune by heart until fishermen and children could hum it in the streets. But one night, while the emperor listened from his bed, the machine gave a harsh click, whirred unevenly, and fell silent. Watchmakers were summoned with tools as fine as needles. They opened the jeweled body and found its little wheels worn and delicate. It could be repaired, but only partly. From then on, the artificial bird could sing only once a year, and even that was considered risky. Years passed, and the palace grew quieter. The emperor became gravely ill, lying beneath heavy curtains while courtiers whispered in distant rooms. Many had already begun bowing toward the next ruler. The jeweled bird rested nearby, silent on its cushion, beautiful but useless. The emperor felt cold and terribly alone. In the dimness, he saw strange faces gathering around his bed, all the good and evil deeds of his life, looking at him with accusing eyes. He asked for music, for drums, for the golden bird to sing, but no one wound the mechanism, and no song came. Death sat at the emperor's bedside, wearing his crown, holding his sword, and carrying his imperial banner. The room seemed filled with memories the emperor could not command away. He cried for music, because music might drown the voices of judgment. But the palace instruments were far off, the servants were afraid, and the artificial bird remained silent. Then, outside the window, a small shape settled on a branch. The real nightingale had heard of the emperor's sickness. It had flown from the deep forest through the night, not for reward, not from duty, but because a living heart had once answered its song with tears. The nightingale began to sing. It sang softly at first, of quiet graves where roses grow, of fresh wind moving over fields, and of the peace that comes to those who are remembered with love. Death listened. The shadows around the emperor's bed grew still. The bird sang of spring forests, blue water, and the human heart when it is humble enough to hear. One by one, death returned the crown, the sword, and the banner. The emperor's breathing eased. At last, death drifted away through the window, carried by the music he had paused to hear. When morning came, the emperor opened his eyes and found sunlight on the curtains. He was alive, the nightingale still perched by the window. The emperor thanked it and begged it to remain forever, promising jewels, servants, and a place of honor. But the nightingale asked for something wiser: freedom. It would not live in a cage again. It would come when it wished, sing at evening, and tell the emperor what it saw beyond the palace walls: the poor, the sorrowful, the honest, and the forgotten. In this way, the ruler would hear truth carried on music. The courtiers entered quietly, expecting sorrow, ceremony, and a dead ruler. Instead, they found the emperor sitting upright, pale but calm, with the window open to the morning air. They froze in astonishment. He greeted them simply and asked for no grand display. None of them saw the nightingale hidden among the branches outside, and none knew why the emperor's eyes had changed. From that day forward, he listened more carefully to the world beyond his walls. He learned that a kingdom cannot be ruled only by polished floors, jeweled machines, and perfect songs repeated on command. The nightingale never became a possession of the court. It belonged to the forest, the sea wind, the moonlit branches, and all who listened without pride. Yet sometimes, when evening softened the porcelain palace and silver bells stirred among the flowers, the emperor opened his window and waited. Then the little gray bird would sing of what it had seen: joy in humble houses, grief behind closed doors, kindness in places power seldom looked. And the emperor, who had once searched his own kingdom through foreign books, learned to hear his people through the free song of a small bird